In a distant and ancient land known as Uz, there lived a man whose name was spoken with reverence and awe throughout the region. His name was Job, a man of immense wealth, unparalleled integrity, and an unwavering faith in God. Job was not just a man of riches, but a man of profound righteousness. His wealth was vast, measured in thousands of sheep, camels, oxen, and donkeys. He owned large tracts of land, with fields that stretched as far as the eye could see. His servants were many, attending to his every need, and his household was a bustling center of activity and prosperity. But of all his treasures, nothing brought Job more joy than his family. He was blessed with 7 sons and 3 daughters, each a source of pride and joy to their father. His children were close, often gathering in each other's homes to feast and celebrate. And Job, a man of deep spiritual concern, would rise early each morning to offer sacrifices on behalf of his children. He feared that in their hearts they might have sinned against God, even unknowingly. Such was the depth of his devotion, a devotion that was known and respected far and wide. Job's life seemed perfect, a harmonious blend of material success and spiritual fulfillment. But this tranquil existence was about to be shattered in ways that Job could never have imagined. Far beyond the earth, in the heavenly realms, a conversation took place that would set the stage for one of the most profound tests of faith in all of human history. God, the Almighty, was seated on his throne, surrounded by his angels. Among them was Satan, the adversary, a being whose very name means accuser. Satan, ever the cynic, challenged the integrity of Job's faith. "Does Job fear God for nothing?" Satan asked, his voice dripping with skepticism. "Have you not put a hedge around him and his household and everything he has? You have blessed the work of his hands, so that his flocks and herds are spread throughout the land. But now stretch out your hand and strike everything he has, and he will surely curse you to your face." God, knowing the true nature of Job's heart, accepted the challenge. "Very well," God said. "Everything he has is in your power, but on the man himself do not lay a finger." With this, Satan departed, ready to unleash a storm of calamities upon Job, confident that he could break this man of faith. The peace and prosperity of Job's life were obliterated in a single, devastating day. As Job went about his daily duties, a messenger came running, breathless with urgency. The oxen were plowing, and the donkeys were grazing nearby, and the Sabeans attacked and made off with them. They put the servants to the sword, and I am the only one who has escaped to tell you. The words had barely settled when another messenger arrived, his face ashen. The fire of God fell from the sky and burned up the sheep and the servants, and I am the only one who has escaped to tell you. Before Job could process this, yet another messenger appeared. The Chaldeans formed 3 raiding parties and swept down on your camels and made off with them. They put the servants to the sword, and I am the only one who has escaped to tell you. But the worst was yet to come. A 4th messenger approached, his steps heavy, his face marked by sorrow. Your sons and daughters were feasting and drinking wine at the oldest brother's house, when suddenly a mighty wind swept in from the desert and struck the 4 corners of the house. It collapsed on them, and they are dead. And I am the only one who has escaped to tell you. In mere moments, everything Job held dear was taken from him. His wealth, his servants, and most heartbreakingly, his beloved children. The magnitude of his loss was unimaginable. Job, a man who had once been the epitome of prosperity and blessing, now stood as a man utterly bereft, alone in his grief. Job's response to this overwhelming tragedy was one of the most remarkable acts of faith recorded in history. He tore his robe in grief, shaved his head, a sign of deepest mourning, and fell to the ground. But instead of cursing God as Satan had predicted, Job did something astonishing. He worshiped. Through his tears, Job uttered words that would echo through the centuries. "Naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked I will depart. The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. May the name of the Lord be praised." In this profound moment of loss, Job did not sin by blaming God. His faith, though shaken, remained intact. But the trials were not over. Satan, frustrated by Job's unwavering devotion, returned to the heavenly court. He conceded that Job had remained faithful despite the loss of his possessions and children, but he argued that Job's true test had yet to come. "Skin for skin," Satan exclaimed. "A man will give all he has for his own life, but stretch out your hand and strike his flesh and bones, and he will surely curse you to your face. Once again, God granted Satan permission, this time to afflict Job's body, but with one condition. Satan was not to take Job's life, and so Satan left, determined to break Job's spirit. Soon after, Job was stricken with painful sores from the soles of his feet to the top of his head. His once robust body, now covered in painful boils, was a sight of utter despair. Job took a piece of broken pottery to scrape himself as he sat among the ashes, a man who had been reduced from greatness to a pitiful state of suffering. His wife, unable to bear the sight of his agony and consumed by her own grief, urged him to curse God and die. But even in his physical torment, Job's faith did not waver. "You are talking like a foolish woman," he replied. "Shall we accept good from God and not trouble?" Despite his immense suffering, Job refused to curse God. His faith, though tested to its limits, held firm. But the emotional toll was growing, and Job was in desperate need of comfort and understanding. News of Job's affliction spread quickly, and soon 3 of his closest friends, Eliphaz the Temanite, Bildad the Shuhite, and Zophar the Naamathite, came to visit him. These were not ordinary friends. They were wise men, respected and known for their counsel. When they arrived and saw Job from a distance, they could hardly recognize him. The once proud and prosperous man was now a shadow of his former self, reduced to sitting in ashes, his body ravaged by disease. The sight moved them to tears. They tore their robes, sprinkled dust on their heads, a traditional expression of mourning, and sat on the ground with Job. For 7 days and 7 nights they remained with him in silence, for they saw how great his suffering was. In this shared silence, they mourned with him, each feeling the weight of Job's despair. But eventually the silence was broken. Job, overwhelmed by his suffering, spoke first. His words were a raw, unfiltered outpouring of pain and despair. "May the day of my birth perish," he cried, "and the night that said, 'A boy is conceived.' That day may it turn to darkness. May God above not care about it. May no light shine on it." Job cursed the day he was born, wishing he had never seen the light of day. He lamented that he had not died at birth, for then he would have been spared this unbearable suffering. His friends listened, their hearts heavy with grief for their friend. But as Job continued to pour out his heart, his friends began to speak, each offering their own interpretation of Job's suffering. Eliphaz was the first to break the silence. A man known for his wisdom and experience, Eliphaz spoke with the calm assurance of someone who believed he understood the ways of God. "If someone ventures a word with you, will you be impatient?" he began. "But who can keep from speaking? Think how you have instructed many, how you have strengthened feeble hands. Your words have supported those who stumbled. You have strengthened faltering knees. But now trouble comes to you, and you are discouraged. It strikes you, and you are dismayed." Eliphaz's words were meant to remind Job of the many times he had comforted others, but now in his own time of need, he seemed to falter. Eliphaz then moved on to a deeper assertion that suffering is a result of sin. "Consider now," he said, "who, being innocent, has ever perished? Where were the upright ever destroyed? As I have observed, those who plow evil and those who sow trouble reap it." Eliphaz was convinced that Job's suffering must be the result of some hidden sin, urging Job to seek God's forgiveness. Job listened, but his heart was not comforted. He knew in the depths of his soul that he had not committed any sin that would warrant such severe punishment. He responded to Eliphaz with a mixture of sorrow and frustration. "If only my anguish could be weighed and all my misery be placed on the scales. It would surely outweigh the sand of the seas. No wonder my words have been impetuous. The arrows of the Almighty are in me. My spirit drinks in their poison. God's terrors are marshaled against me." Job's words reflected his deep agony and confusion. He felt as though he was being punished by God, yet he could not understand why. His suffering was not just physical, but spiritual, as he grappled with the seeming injustice of his situation. Bildad, the second friend, spoke next. Unlike Eliphaz, Bildad's approach was more direct, even blunt. He began by defending the justice of God. "How long will you say such things? Your words are a blustering wind. Does God pervert justice? Does the Almighty pervert what is right? When your children sinned against him, he gave them over to the penalty of their sin. Bildad's words, though harsh, reflected a common belief of the time, that suffering was a direct result of sin, a punishment from God. He urged Job to plead with God for mercy, to live a life of purity and righteousness so that his fortunes might be restored. But Job, still maintaining his innocence, could not accept Bildad's reasoning. His suffering, he insisted, was not the result of any wrongdoing. In his response, Job expressed a profound sense of despair. How can a mortal be righteous before God? If one wished to contend with him, he could not answer him 1 time out of 1,000. God is wise in heart and mighty in strength. Who has hardened himself against him and prospered? He removes the mountains, and they do not know when he overturns them in his anger. He shakes the earth out of its place, and its pillars tremble. Job's words revealed his deep awareness of the power and majesty of God. He acknowledged God's sovereignty, but was deeply troubled by the apparent injustice of his situation. He longed for a mediator, someone who could stand between him and God, someone who could understand his plight and plead his case. Zophar, the third friend, was the most outspoken and direct. He chastised Job for his boldness in questioning God's justice. Are all these words to go unanswered? Is this talker to be vindicated? Will your idle talk reduce others to silence? Will no one rebuke you when you mock? You say to God, my beliefs are flawless and I am pure in your sight. Oh, how I wish that God would speak, that he would open his lips against you and disclose to you the secrets of wisdom, for true wisdom has 2 sides. Know this, God has even forgotten some of your sin. Zophar's words stung, for he was suggesting that Job's suffering was a lenient punishment compared to what he truly deserved. He urged Job to repent, promising that if he rid himself of sin, his life would once again be filled with light and security. But Job, though deeply distressed, stood firm in his conviction that he had done nothing to deserve such suffering. He lashed out at his friends, accusing them of being miserable comforters. You are all miserable comforters, he cried. Will your long-winded speeches never end? What ails you that you keep on arguing? I also could speak like you if you were in my place. I could make fine speeches against you and shake my head at you. But my mouth would encourage you. Comfort from my lips would bring you relief. Job's words were a desperate plea for understanding, a cry for comfort that his friends had failed to provide. His speeches grew increasingly filled with anguish as he questioned the fairness of his suffering and the apparent prosperity of the wicked. Why do the wicked live on, growing old and increasing in power? They see their children established around them, their offspring before their eyes. Their homes are safe and free from fear. The rod of God is not upon them. Job's lamentations reflected a deep internal struggle, a wrestling with the nature of God's justice. He yearned to present his case directly to God, to understand why he had been subjected to such unbearable pain. If only I knew where to find him, Job cried. If only I could go to his dwelling, I would state my case before him and fill my mouth with arguments. I would find out what he would answer me and consider what he would say. In the midst of his despair, however, Job's faith did not completely waver. He spoke of his Redeemer with a deep hope that despite all his suffering, he would one day see God with his own eyes. I know that my Redeemer lives, Job declared, and that in the end he will stand upon the earth. And after my skin has been destroyed, yet in my flesh I will see God. I myself will see him with my own eyes, I and not another. How my heart yearns within me. It was at this moment that a new voice entered the conversation. Elihu, a younger man who had remained silent during the discourse between Job and his friends, could no longer contain his thoughts. Elihu had listened patiently, but now his anger burned against Job for justifying himself rather than God, and against Job's friends for failing to refute Job's arguments effectively. Elihu began by acknowledging his youth and the deference he had shown to his elders by remaining silent. But now he felt compelled to speak. I am young in years and you are old. That is why I was fearful, not daring to tell you what I know. I thought, age should speak, advanced years should teach wisdom. But it is the spirit in a person, the breath of the Almighty, that gives them understanding. It is not only the old who are wise, not only the aged who understand what is right. Elihu's speech was filled with passion and conviction. He emphasized the greatness of God and the limitations of human understanding. God is greater than any human being, Elihu asserted. Why do you complain to him that he responds to no one's words? For God does speak, now one way, now another, though no one perceives it. Elihu reminded Job that God could speak through various means, through dreams, through pain, and through messengers, all with the purpose of guiding people away from wrongdoing and toward the light. Elihu's words were a prelude to what was to come. As he finished speaking, a storm began to brew on the horizon. Thunder rumbled and lightning flashed, signaling the approach of something extraordinary. Out of the whirlwind, God himself spoke to Job. But rather than giving Job the answers he sought, God responded with a series of questions. Questions that revealed the vastness of his creation and the limitations of human understanding. Where were you when I laid the earth's foundation? God asked. Tell me if you understand. Who marked off its dimensions? Surely you know. Who stretched a measuring line across it? On what were its footings set? Or who laid its cornerstone? While the morning stars sang together and all the angels shouted for joy? God's questions continued, each one more humbling than the last. Have you ever given orders to the morning or shown the dawn its place? Have you journeyed to the springs of the sea or walked in the recesses of the deep? Have the gates of death been shown to you? Have you seen the gates of the shadow of death? Job, overwhelmed by the majesty of God's words, realized the limitations of his knowledge. He understood that his suffering was part of a much larger, incomprehensible divine plan. Humbled and in awe, Job responded, I am unworthy. How can I reply to you? I put my hand over my mouth. I spoke once, but I have no answer. Twice, but I will say no more. God continued to speak, illustrating the vastness of his power and the mysteries of creation. He described the wonders of the natural world, the feeding of the lions, the birthing of mountain goats, the soaring of the hawk, and the strength of the horse in battle. Through these descriptions, God made it clear that his wisdom and power were far beyond human understanding. In the face of such overwhelming evidence of God's greatness, Job repented, not of any specific sin, but of his questioning of God's justice. He acknowledged that he had spoken of things he did not understand, things too wonderful for him to know. My ears had heard of you, Job confessed, but now my eyes have seen you. Therefore I despise myself and repent in dust and ashes. And so the test of Job's faith came to an end. God, who had allowed the trials to prove the depth of Job's faith, now restored his fortunes. Job's health was returned to him, and his wealth was doubled. His brothers and sisters, and all who had known him, came and ate with him in his house. They comforted and consoled him over all the trouble the Lord had brought upon him, and each one gave him a piece of silver and a gold ring. God blessed the latter part of Job's life more than the first. He was blessed with another 7 sons and 3 daughters, more beautiful than any in the land. Job lived a long life, seeing his children and their children to the 4th generation. And in his old age, Job died, full of years and at peace. The story of Job is not just a tale of loss and restoration. It is a profound exploration of the nature of suffering, the limits of human understanding, and the necessity of faith in the face of life's greatest challenges. Job's unwavering faith, even in the midst of unimaginable suffering, serves as a powerful reminder that true faith is not dependent on our circumstances, but is rooted in a deep trust in God's wisdom and justice. As we reflect on Job's journey, we are reminded that our own lives may also be filled with trials that test the very core of our faith. But like Job, we are called to remain steadfast, trusting that in the end, our faith will be rewarded, and we will come to understand the greater purpose behind our struggles.